So we'll get started now. Welcome, everybody. Great to have you all. It's really nice. You know, we've created a nice group of people. We meet every week. Maybe one day we'll actually be able to meet in the same country, in the same room. Yeah. Actually, we need to wish to meet in Israel, right? That's what we want to do.
That's right.
Okay. Anyway, this week's Torah portion is Yitro, or Jethro. And the portion is named for the visit. The portion opens with the visit of Jethro, coming to Moses. I'm not going to deal with that part of the Torah portion for now, but I'd like to skip to really what is the main focus of this Torah portion, and that, of course, is the Ten Commandments, revelation at Sinai. And I know everybody knows the Ten Commandments, so I'm not going to do that much discussion of the Ten Commandments themselves. But I want to just note a little bit about the narrative. If you were going to say, okay, so how did it all happen? What exactly happened? Everybody's going to tell you, oh, there was thunder and lightning and clouds, and God spoke these 10 commandments. Moses went up to Mount Sinai and was there for 40 days, and he received the 10 commandments on these 2 tablets, and he comes down. Okay? Now, however, if you really want to go and follow the narrative as it is written mostly in this Torah portion, but also in some of the chapters afterwards, it is an extremely confusing narrative. And if you really want to pay attention to how many times it says Moses went up and then he went down and went up and went down, this man was a very tired man. He went up, God spoke to him, came down again, went back up, went down again. Okay, so that is part of the confusion. Also, there's a lot of different messages that are going on throughout this portion and onward. So if we really want to dig out the meanings, and there's been many commentaries, of course, that discuss this and many different opinions and how it works. I would be happy to sit with any one of you at some point in person, and we can go through this. It would take a couple hours. So we're not going to do that today, but I want to just give you an overview of what the narrative is, and then we're going to try to take it apart and understand it a little better. Okay, so it begins in chapter 19. Okay, at the beginning of chapter 19, we read that the nation comes to Sinai, and then we have verse 3 already, Moses going up for the first time. Okay, Moses goes up to God. The Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, "Thus shall you say to the house of Jacob and declare to the children of Israel." This really is where the narrative begins. And here Moses is up on the mountain, God's talking to him and talks about covenant, talks about the nation of Israel as a chosen people, a nation of priests. And he basically is saying to Moses, I'm going to be giving them some kind of covenant, some kind of something. It's not even so clear what he's giving them, what he wants for them. But Moses goes back down the mountain, tells the nation this message from God, and the nation agrees. Okay? Then, starting in verse 10 of that same chapter, we start getting instructions about the kind of preparation that the nation has to go through for this special day that's going to happen 3 days later. And there's a lot of, the preparations include they have to, wash themselves, get themselves ready. They need to be distanced from the mountain. All these different things. We'll discuss that afterwards. Then we have, starting in verse 16, we have a certain description of the fireworks that go on that day, this amazing stuff, okay? And then Moses comes down, and that's also very interesting. When the actual 10 commandments are given, Moses is not up there, he's down below, okay? And then we have the actual text of the 10 commandments, and then we have what's going on in the meantime. After the 10 commandments, we have a description starting in verse 16. Now we're already in chapter 20. In verse 15, we start having a description of what's going on down below while these 10 commandments are being given. And Moses has to calm the nation. They're very, uptight and everything. And then in verse 18, Moses goes up again. Okay, and from the middle of verse 18, okay, until chapter 23, towards the end of chapter 23, Moses is ostensibly up on the mountain getting a whole series of commandments of all kinds. These laws, all kinds of civil laws, what will end up being the bulk of next week's Torah portion. And then afterwards, he comes down again. We have in chapter 24 a description of a covenant ceremony. And then in chapter 24, verse 12, up until chapter 32, we have Moses going up again for 40 days, and we have more things that he's being told, mostly about the tabernacle. And then in chapter 32, Moses comes down with the 2 tablets and sees the golden calf, and we have that whole story, and the 10 commandments are broken. Okay, and then at the end of chapter 34, Moses goes back up again. He gets the 2nd tablets, and at this part, when he comes back down, we have a mention again of this idea of a covenant. He's bringing down these tablets, and there's also a mention of some kind of covenant. And just a little bit of an addendum, in Leviticus chapter 26, there is covenant text, okay? And it is a covenant, according to what's written there, covenant that actually happens in Mount Sinai. It seems to be what's happening at the end of Leviticus is a section that was actually happened earlier and is stuck there at the end, okay? That is something we will deal with as well. So basically, if I go through this whole narrative, aside from the fact that how many times Moses has gone up and down, what we see is basically 2 themes that are kind of interwoven. One theme is the actual experience of revelation and everything that goes with it, the fire and the thunder and the cloud, and the actual text of the 10 commandments and everything having to do with what happens on that day. And a second notion that is expressed here is this idea of a covenant. And so what I'm doing now is that most of the issue having to do with the covenant ceremony, we will actually be reading in next week's Torah portion. So I'm already giving you a heads up. Next week's Torah portion, we're going to be focusing on covenant. We're going to be seeing what is written in next week's Torah portion, but relating it back to some of the verses we saw in this week's Torah portion. Okay, today, what I would like to do is focus on the 10 commandments themselves, that whole event and a bit of the text. Okay, so first of all, if we go, now we're going to actually look a little bit in the text. Okay, so if we go to chapter 19, this is that part of the introduction. God is telling Moses, what's going on and what this is going to look like. So verses 3 to 6, we have God's introduction to what this is. And I'd like to read verses 5 and 6. Now then, if you will obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured, you will be a treasure for me from all the nations, because the earth is all mine. You shall be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel. Okay, so in the introduction to all this, in addition to this covenant, and we will deal with these verses as well when we talk about the covenant, but as a sort of introduction to the 10 commandments, clearly they have to do with a new relationship that God is forming with the nation of Israel, who he's seeing as a treasured nation and a nation of priests and a holy a nation of priests and a holy nation. Okay. Then we start going into, in the continuation, the next verses, there is a lot of description about the various preparation. They have to prepare themselves, wash, clothes, different things like that. The idea of holiness is reinforced. So not only is the nation going to be a holy nation, but this whole experience is talking about holiness. The fact that in verse 10, you need to sanctify yourselves. That's from the same word as holy in Hebrew. You need to make yourselves holy and tomorrow and wash your clothes. So it's not just cleaning yourself, but there's a process here where they have to become holy. And that, of course, jives with this idea of being a holy nation. The focus, though, here, and this is very, very important, the kind of preparation that they're going through, although each individual person is going through this preparation, the focus is on not the individual, but on the nation. The nation is preparing. The nation will be holy. This will be some kind of an experience between God and the nation as a whole. And if we see in verse 8, when Moses brings these words to the nation, the scripture tells us all the people answered as one. Okay, so everybody answered as individuals, but they answered as one people. And that is very, very important here. Verse 12, we see another element of this preparation, and that is the distancing. Okay, and you can say this is also related to holiness. Very often holiness in the Bible is about separation, is about distancing, is about, there are certain places, for example, in the tabernacle, you will have the holy and the holy of holies. The holier a place is, the more distance a person needs to be. The Holy of Holies, where the ark is in the tabernacle, later in the temple, is a place where no one may enter except for the high priest one day a year. So the holier you are, the more of a distance that you will be. So here we see that in verse 12, you shall set bounds for the people round the mountain. Okay, beware of going up the mountain or touching the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death or shall die. Okay, so here there's an indication here, not just of holiness, but separation and danger. Okay, if someone gets too close, it's dangerous. They will die. And again, it's very similar to this idea of the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle. Anyone who goes into these places that they should not be, that are so supremely holy, people will die. We see later on in the book of Leviticus, the story of Aaron's two sons, Nadav and Abihu, who bring a strange fire. It's not very clear what exactly they do, but it's clear that they're going in to a holy place at a time and in a situation that is not permitted, and therefore they will die. Now, verse 18. Now Mount Sinai was all in smoke, for the Lord had come down upon it in fire. The smoke rose like the smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled violently. Okay, this is a very scary kind of experience, and reinforces this message of fear, of awe, and of distance. Okay, everybody is seeing what is happening, and the message here is not, I am your father, God, who's come to you to be close and intimate. The message here is distance, fear, and trembling. Okay, that's very, very much a part of what all this is. And if we go to chapter 20, verse 15, right after the text of the Ten Commandments, we see an unusual kind of statement. All the people saw the voices and the torches. Okay, now in my Bible, this has been translated as all the people saw the thunder and the lightning, but that's not what it says. Okay, it may be, the interpretation might be thunder and lightning. Okay, but that's not what it says. It says the voices or the sounds. They saw the sounds and the torches or the fire. Now, it's very easy to see fire. When is the last time you saw a sound? This already sets up a notion of mystery, something that things that are happening are not only awe-inspiring, but they're difficult to understand. They're mysterious. How does one see a sound? Okay, and of course, the natural response that is a result is that the nation pulls back in fear. They don't know really what's going on. Okay, let's go back to other things that is hard to imagine. In chapter 19, verses 18, well, we already read this. Okay, we already read that. The fire and the sounds and the shofar that is being blown. It's a very mysterious kind of thing. And one further element that we see in all of the description of the events surrounding Revelation is this idea of the cloud. We keep seeing the cloud. Okay, take a look at chapter 19, verse 16. And a dense cloud is upon the mountain. Okay, chapter 20, verse 18. So the people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick cloud where God was. Now here in the Hebrew, it doesn't actually say anan, it says arafel. Arafel is usually more like fog, okay? But it's a similar kind of thing. It is a thick, dense cloud, okay? Chapter 24, verse 15. Right, I'm going to go to it. Chapter 24, verse 15. When Moses ascended the mountain, the cloud covered the mountain. The presence of the Lord abode on Mount Sinai, and the cloud hid it for 6 days. On the seventh day, he called to Moses from the midst of the cloud. So here, there's this visual understanding of a cloud that's hovering on the top of the mountain, that God is speaking to Moses from the cloud, and at some point, Moses actually goes into the cloud. So it's this cloud that in a way represents the presence of God. It is a cloud that everybody sees. They cannot see God. And perhaps when we have that verse before that we read, they see the sounds. Perhaps that is a way of saying that, of course, you cannot see God. God does not have a body. He doesn't have a form. God is just this presence that you feel or sense. You cannot see it. What are they seeing? They're seeing the cloud, but they also hear God's voice. And so perhaps what they're saying is they're seeing the cloud from which is the voice. And because they're not seeing God's person, okay, but they're seeing the voice, that the voice is essentially the essence of God. And why is the voice the essence of God? Because it is that voice or those sounds that will produce the actual 10 commandments. And in that sense, perhaps what we are saying is the essence of God is his word. What God tells us, what he commands us, is his essence, which is why we're seeing the voices, we're seeing the sounds. Now, I also want to point out something at the very end of the book of Exodus, when the tabernacle is already built. It's right away at the end, and the verse 33. This is chapter 40, verse 33. We talk about the tabernacle has been erected, and Moses finished the work. The cloud, verse 34, the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of God filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the presence of the Lord filled the tabernacle. So here we have a very similar description to what we had with Mount Sinai. Also, Mount Sinai, this cloud covers the hill, and that's representing the presence of God. And here also the cloud is hovering on the tabernacle, which also represents the presence of God. And Mount Sinai, we say Moses went up into the cloud, and the tabernacle here, it says Moses could not go into the cloud because he couldn't go into the tent of meeting because the cloud was there. The cloud prevented Moses from going in. Now, there's a wonderful, wonderful commentary on this, and connects this verse at the end of Exodus with the verse at the beginning of Leviticus, where the Leviticus begins, the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, speak to the Israelite people. And that he called to Moses is a sort of beckoning. Okay, Moses is standing there outside the tent of meeting. This cloud is there, and he says, I can't go in. God is there. How can I go into his presence? And yet God beckons to him, and he comes in. One of the which I just think is a beautiful, beautiful image. But one of the things that tells me something, if we talked about the cloud, what is the cloud then? It not only represents a one-time event or phenomenon that they saw in Revelation, but the cloud itself represents ongoing revelation. The revelation of God at Sinai was indeed a miraculous, mysterious, very unusual event. required preparation, required all kinds of rules and regulations, the distancing and the fear and the clouds and the fire and the thunders and the voices and all that sort of stuff. Okay, but the same cloud showing up in the tabernacle. There is also a commentary, and both the commentary for the Leviticus and this one is both Nachmanides that mentions this, Ramban in Hebrew. The idea of the tabernacle being a vehicle that God gives as a gift to the nation of Israel, a vehicle by which they can continue the process of revelation, that they can continue to be in God's presence in a different kind of way. If Moses on that Mount Sinai, there was just Moses up there, and it was very unusual, it was very one time, and yet to a certain degree, that presence of God and that revelation of God through the symbol of the cloud, through the tabernacle, which continues to always be in the center of the nation, travels with the nation, and of course, when they enter Israel, ends up being in permanent locations, first at Shiloh, later in Jerusalem. This becomes the vehicle by which God gives us ongoing revelation, even after this one-time revelation. Now, after all of that, I want to just say a few words about the first commandment. Well, first of all, I want to say something about Moses' role here. In just before the commandments begin, I noted before that Moses is actually down below when they hear the voice of God. Okay, and it's very clearly written. If you see, look in verse in chapter 19, and in verse 20, it says, "And God descended on Mount Sinai," okay, and he called to Moses, and Moses went up. And then it says, the Lord said to Moses, "Go down, warn the people not to break through to the Lord to gaze, lest any of them perish." So he goes back down again.
Really? I'm listening.
And at that point, he's down below. It says, verse 25, "And Moses went down to the people and spoke to them." And then right away, we have the text of the 10 Commandments. Right after that, we have a response of the nation. Where is it? Here we go. And verse 16, in chapter 20, verse 16, the nation turns to Moses. "You speak to us," they said to Moses, "and we will obey, but let not God speak to us, lest we die." Moses answered the people, "Be not afraid, for God has come only in order to test you, and in order that the fear of him may be ever with you, so that you do not go astray." And there are commentaries who have noted, and this is also in the Midrash, that when God spoke to the nation, they could not really hear and understand clearly what God was saying. It was such a terrifying experience, and it was so mysterious that it was hard for them to understand. And therefore, Moses here is not just calming them down, but he's helping them to understand exactly what it is they have heard. Now, that's the interpretation you may like or not like, but it says a lot, I believe, as to what this experience of the 10 Commandments is. How it's not just God saying, "Okay, everybody listen up, guys," and talking as if you're talking a human being to human being, but that it's something so much more supernatural that it's very difficult even for the people standing there to absorb and understand what it is they're experiencing. Okay, lastly, I just want to make a comment, though, about the first commandment. Now, I am well aware that there is a difference between the way Jews count the 10 Commandments and the way Christians count the 10 Commandments, at least in general, okay? And the main one, and there's a few minor differences, but a major difference is the first commandment. We read this verse, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage." That verse, okay? Verse number 2. That for us is the first commandment. Now, I know many Christians say, no, the first commandment is, "You shall have no other gods besides me," okay? That might be part of the first commandment, but for us, there's no question. The first commandment begins, I am the Lord your God. So you may ask, how can that be a commandment? It's a statement of fact. The commandment then begins, you should not have any other gods. That makes a lot of sense. So why is it that we count the first commandment as I am the Lord your God? So first of all, you can say that this is a meta commandment, okay? If you're going to listen to God as he commands you all these things, you have to believe he exists. And therefore, it becomes this meta commandment of believe in God, because if you don't believe in God, you're not going to trust anything else that's said. But then again, that begs the question, because you can just as easily say, okay, it's the assumption, it's the introduction. I am the Lord your God. It's kind of like a continuation of the first verse. God spoke all these words saying, I am the Lord your God. Okay, I'm the introduction. This is the introduction. I'm the Lord your God. Now you got to listen to me. You should have no other gods before me. But I think that by putting this commandment, this statement, I am the Lord your God, as a commandment, understanding this as a commandment, I think it's telling us something addition. And that is focusing on here the last words of this sentence, not the first. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Now, there's no question that nobody is going to pay attention to the 10 commandments or to any commandments of God if they don't believe he exists. So if it's just, I'm the Lord your God, okay, that makes sense. That's just this statement of introduction. But as soon as God says, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, what he is saying, he didn't say, I am the Lord your God, creator of the universe. That's a very, very important point. In fact, most people, if you ask anybody of any faith who believes in the one God, okay, and you ask him, well, what do you believe in? Why do you believe in this God? They're going to start with, he's creator of the universe. He created the universe, therefore the universe belongs to him, therefore he controls us, therefore he's in charge, therefore he's the master, all that makes sense. But there is a huge difference between believing in a God who is the master or creator of the universe and then left it to take care of itself. Okay? And that's what God could have done. God could have created the world, created the laws of nature, and just let it go on. Okay? Now, God did create the laws of nature, and he does let things go on. And there are certain things that we call nature. Nature exists. Is nature a God? No. God created nature. But there's something other than that God does. And that is that God has not abandoned the universe. God remains involved in what happens on the earth. And therefore, when God says, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt, that is a superb example of God's continued involvement with the world and with humanity. Because what is the story of God in taking them out of Egypt? It's a God who hears the cries of the nation as they are suffering in Egypt, and he responds to those cries. And it is that sort of belief that becomes a commandment. You must not only believe that I created the universe. Of course, you have to believe that. That's fundamental. You have to believe, and this is where the commandment comes in. You have to believe in a God who continues to be involved, who commands you to do things now, and who will be watching to see if you're obeying those commandments, who will be involved with what you are doing, who will be involved with what nations are doing. And of course, this connects back with the introduction that God gives about giving this to the nation of Israel as a holy nation, a nation of priests. Nation of priests, a nation of priests, a nation who has to serve God. What's a priest? Priest isn't a fancy title with a crown. A nation of priests means a nation who serves God in holiness. And this represents the continued involvement that God has with the nation of Israel, with humanity, with the world. And this is what he is expecting. This becomes the first commandment. The first commandment is to believe in a God who continues to be involved in every day and every single development of humanity and of the world. That's what I have to say for today about the 10 Commandments. Of course, I only scratched the surface. Just wanted to give you some ideas, things to think about. Next week, we will delve into this idea of the covenant at Sinai, which involves some of the things we saw here and other things that we will delve into more fully that are written in next week's Torah portion. Have a great weekend. Shabbat Shalom.
I hope you enjoyed that video, and we'd like to be sure you're getting all of our video content. So just click on the subscribe button below as well as on the notification bell, and that way you will have easy access to all our material. We look forward to staying in touch with you. God bless you, and have a wonderful day.